I am Dayan, and this is an overview of the British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to our channel. Every month, we would be selecting and helping one of you through your immigration journey absolutely free. So once you've subscribed, drop in a comment below. For most of the subcategories under BC PNP, you need an eligible job offer. Once you have it, you need to register on British Columbia's portal named Skills Immigration Registration System or SIRS. A link to the portal is in the description below. You can go through their technical guide for detailed instructions, and a link for that is also in the description below. The registration is free and you are not required to upload any documents during the registration process. Once your registration is completed, you would receive a score and would enter the pool of candidates. The BC PNP periodically conducts draws and selects the highest ranking candidates from each category. Once you get an invitation to submit, you have 30 days to submit an application. If all goes well, you get a nomination from the British Columbia, after which you apply to the IRCC for immigration. The British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program or BC PNP has three streams. The Entrepreneur Immigration, which is for experienced entrepreneurs who want to actively manage a business in British Columbia. The Skills Immigration, for skilled and semi-skilled workers in high-demand occupations in British Columbia. And the Express Entry British Columbia, which is a faster way for eligible skilled workers to immigrate to British Columbia. Since most of you would be interested in Skills Immigration and Express Entry British Columbia streams, we will be discussing these in detail. The Skills Immigration and the Express Entry British Columbia have very similar subcategories, so we'll be discussing them side by side. BC PNP is one of the most complicated immigration programs, so sit tight. We'll try our best to simplify it. We have combined the similar categories to make things simpler. On the top, you can see the subcategories, and below them is the criteria. The names of the categories are self-explanatory. Skilled worker category is for managers, professionals, etc. Healthcare professionals category is for doctors, nurses, etc. and so on. Below each category are two columns for the main categories we discussed at the start of this video. One for Skills Immigration and the other for Express Entry British Columbia. For the Express Entry British Columbia subcategories, candidates must have an Express Entry profile and must meet the requirements of at least one of the Express Entry programs along with the relevant BC PNP subcategory. Registration with SIRS is mandatory and free of cost, but candidates under the healthcare professional and international postgraduate categories don't need to register with SIRS and can directly apply through BC PNP online. Canadian education is only required for the international graduate and international postgraduate categories, and the said education must have been completed in the last 3 years. For international postgraduate subcategories, the education should be from a university in British Columbia. An eligible job offer is required for all categories with the exception of international postgraduate category. The eligible knock categories against each BC PNP subcategory have been mentioned. Please note that employers have to meet a stringent criteria to make an eligible offer. You can find more about this in the program guide, which has a link in the description below. 2 years of work experience is required for skilled worker and healthcare professional categories. The IELTS requirement is very complicated, but we have tried to capture it as well. Basically, for a job offer under NOC 0 or A, you do not need a language test, but it helps if you take one since you can claim points for it. For a job offer under NOC B, C or D, you need a CLB 4. CLB is the Canadian language benchmark and is covered later in this video. Please remember that if you are applying under one of the Express Entry subcategories, you have to meet the language requirements of your Express Entry category as well. There is also a minimum income requirement for every subcategory, with the exception of international postgraduate subcategories since they do not require a job offer in the first place. The minimum income requirement basically means that your job offer should be paying you at least this much and is also covered later in this video. That must have been a lot to process. Now let's calculate our scores using the BC PNP scoring guide. The BC PNP has two broad scoring sections, the economic factors and the human capital factors, which have further subsections. Let's have a look at each of the subsections to calculate our scores. We get different points for the NOC skill level of the job offered. The maximum points are for NOC categories 0 and A. We also get different points for the amount of annual wage offered to us under the job offer. You can pause the video and find your category to calculate your points. The points under BC PNP even vary with the area where we have been offered the job. You can pause the video to find yours. Like most immigration programs, the more experience the better. With BC PNP, the cap is with 60 months or 5 years. The highest level of our education also has different points, highest being for Masters and PhD. We mentioned the CLB scores earlier. CLB stands for Canadian Language Benchmark. Here we have mentioned the minimum listening, reading, writing and speaking scores required for a CLB score. Based on your subcategory and NOC code, you can find the required IELTS scores against the required CLB. You can also see the points you would get under the BC PNP for the score you get. We also mentioned the minimum income requirement earlier, and this table here shows the minimum income required based on the number of family members. The job offered should pay at least this much for you to be eligible under BC PNP. Remember that you are not required to meet this requirement under the international postgraduate subcategories since they do not require a job offer in the first place. Coming to the cost to apply under the BC PNP. The application cost is 700 Canadian dollars, but you have to pay it after the invitation to submit your application. And how long does the application processing take? 80% of the applications under the Skills Immigration and Express Entry British Columbia categories are processed within 2 to 3 months of the application submission. This is the time for receiving a nomination from British Columbia and does not include the IRCC processing, which is another 6 months. We have tried to give you an overview of the British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe.